President Cyril Ramaphosa arrived in Germany on Thursday to attend a G20 Compact with Africa investment summit meeting in Berlin. The G20 Compact with Africa was initiated under the G20 German presidency in 2017 to promote private investment in Africa. Now, Ramaphosa and other heads of state discussed vaccine production in Africa as the key to growing the continent's post-pandemic economies. Currently, 12 countries have joined the initiative: Benin, Burkina Faso, Côte, Egypt, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea, Morocco, Rwanda, and Senegal, Togo and Tunisia, some of those countries. President Cyril Ramaphosa was accompanied by Minister of International Relations, Naledi Pandor. To tell us more about the summit and its outcomes, we're joined by Associate Professor at the University of Pretoria, Dr. Jacob Musyoka. Dr. Musyoka, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Now, the G20 Compact, so many points and factors on the agenda. And as we listened to President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was co-chairing the event, he really emphasized the COVID-19 vaccine rollout and how Africa as a continent cannot be left out when it comes to this process. Talk to us about perhaps some of the highlights of this compact G20 and also what it aims to achieve.
Thank you so much, Mpo. So the G20 Compact with Africa, as you rightly indicated, was started in 2017, and Germany was very critical to that. And of course, South Africa being part of the G20, it was very much involved in the initiative, establishment of the initiative. The key focus, as you also rightly indicate, is really to look at ways in which we can move away from traditional development methodologies, which for the last decade or two has largely been aid and provision of aid, especially to African countries. And that has not really materialized in the Visa Moya rights about dead aid. And I think there is a very good history of how, going all the way back to the 1960s, aid has delivered more negatives than positives within the continent. So the idea around the G20 Compact with Africa has largely been to look at ways in which we can change this kind of development methodologies that have not worked and look at private sector-driven development. They focus essentially on three core issues. One is on macroeconomic stability, and this is ways in which governments can balance their books, improvement of state capacity to facilitate private sector development, as well as the provision of public infrastructure by the state. So that's one area. The second one is largely on creating business conditions under which private investors can thrive. And this has a lot to do with regulatory policies so that there is ease to do business. And the third and final aspect relates to financial reforms. And this, again, also has to do with enabling for example, local capital markets or domestic capital markets, as they refer them to, and these would help to facilitate investment by private investors. So those are the three core issues that the initiative focuses on.
As we listened to President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking there, he really was at pains to explain the vaccine inequality, saying this is a huge factor that needs to be considered because it could put Africa as a continent, at risk when it comes to vaccination accessing, and saying that, warning against the inequality, which could also be a huge factor here when it comes to the goals of achieving herd immunity. How far are we in those discussions, especially as we consider how South Africa and India have reiterated this call for a temporary halt to intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines?
So firstly, I think South Africa, unfortunately, is really lagged behind. There were preliminary discussions when COVID-19 started, somewhere around April, when there were trials that were going on around the world. And there were musings in South Africa to the extent in which it was suggested that we really needed to establish a plant or a manufacturing of vaccines or trials here. And unfortunately, the ship has left the shore. So we've been really left behind. And I think, in my view, it's a lost opportunity. But India has made progress. As you know, they are providing or manufacturing the AstraZeneca, and they've exported, although they've really also had a major setback with their third wave. But both South Africa and India have been pushing to ensure that this vaccine inequality does not really go beyond where it is. But I have to emphasize that it's a little bit too late. I think that, as you know, most of the vaccines that have been rolled out have really come out of the Americas and, of course, Europe, and we haven't produced. So it's a little bit too late to now talk about how we can equalize vaccine rollout, unfortunately. And given that several countries, UK in particular, Canada, and several others, are really arriving or almost reaching their herd immunity, so they will not really need any of the vaccines if we have to manufacture this part of the world. Although in South Africa, we've hitched the wagon and we are manufacturing in Eastern Cape, but as I've indicated, it's a little bit too late. So I think this is going to be, it's an opportunity for private sector investment, and I think that links very well to the Compact with Africa initiative, but unfortunately it's a little bit too late as far as developing countries are concerned.
The vaccine policy also has an impact on the growth of our economy. That was some of the factors put forward by President Cyril Ramaphosa when it comes to accessing finances to really give the continent and South Africa that extra boost. Are the financial options that Ramaphosa put on the table viable? And, is it too little, too late, perhaps, when it comes to accessing this finance?
So at the moment, I think with the president pushing for access to finance within the international financial institutions, and by the way, I have to indicate that the initiative, the G20 Compact with Africa initiative, is largely governed by or funded by the IMF, the African Development Bank, and the World Bank. And these three financial institutions are critical in also trying to fund, for example, initiatives, private sector initiatives around vaccine rollout and so on. IMF, as we know, has provided the largest bailout of countries in history, given the COVID-19 pandemic. So coming back to your question more directly, I think that there is a space. It might be still a little bit late, but I think we are still better late than never. So South Africa is, I would say, again, to be fair, that there is progress that we can harness, or we can harness some of the opportunities now, which we failed to harness a couple of months ago. And several other African countries, unfortunately, have not really come to the party as South Africa has. So on that point, I think we have to be fair that the president is on the right track, and if there is if the international financial institutions concede, then we at least get out with a small piece of the pie, although we could have gotten out with a bigger one than what we are going to come out with.
The G20 Compact, this agreement is almost about 3.5 years old. Is it really, just looking back from 2017, achieving the meaningful impact that it should be achieving, just perhaps assessing its track record?
So there are two reports that have come out. The first was a 2018 interim report, and there is a 2019 annual report or performance report as well. And firstly, for 3 years for any policy or initiative such as this, it's probably a very short time to assess meaningful progress. But preliminary data suggests that foreign direct investment seems to be increasing in countries that have signed the compact. By the way, it's open to all African countries, and for all those since 2017, only 12 countries have acceded to it. And interestingly, the majority of the countries are Western African countries, which amounts to 6 of them, and then you've got 3 in North Africa, and you've got 7 in West Africa, 3 in North Africa, 3 in East Africa, and 0 in Southern Africa, including South Africa, which shares alongside Germany. So South Africa is not actually signed to the compact itself. So Southern African countries have been left behind, number one, and the countries that have signed, there is a preliminary indication that there is increased percentage of foreign direct investment, which is really what the initiative is also largely about.
German Chancellor Merkel emphasized in her opening speech that Compact with Africa is in fact working. And of course for her it was marking the end of an era, as she says goodbye. Will her space, well, perhaps her absence be felt in this agreement as we try and also assess Germany's impact when it comes to achieving those overall goals?
Absolutely. I think she's performed very well domestically and internationally on a range of issues, not least immigration issues, for example, climate change, and certainly now this initiative, which really is part of our legacy as far as geopolitics are concerned, and especially initiatives that reach out to developing countries. And the lingering question in development economics has been, how can we create a world where there is mutual benefit? And I think this might get us closer to answering that question. So Angela Merkel is certainly going to be missed, and I think that this initiative has her name on it. And as you've also indicated, the progress and the fact that there is an indication of performance or positive performance of the countries that have acceded, that goes to really to her legacy. And I think that perhaps it needs to be continued. But again, the question lingers as to how and why some countries have been left behind in Southern Africa. And that's something that maybe the initiative, and with South Africa being a co-chair, needs to begin to push more countries to accede to it, especially if there are meaningful outcomes arising out of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to leave it there. Associate Professor at the University of Pretoria and Development Economist, Dr. Jacob Musyoka, really just summing up the presence of South Africa at the G20 Compact with Africa, as well as some of the achievements and highlights of that conference that has been taking place.